Hello, everyone. Welcome and good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for webinar 5 out of our 6-part webinar series. My name is Allie Rickey, and I am a facilitator for the James Patterson Literacy Challenge at the University of Florida Literacy Institute, and I will be your host tonight. I just have a few logistics to share before we get started, per usual. First, all webinars for this series are being recorded and will be available on our UFLI, that's UFLI, website and our Facebook page. Our first 4 webinars are already posted. In webinar 1, we shared an introduction to teaching reading online. Webinar 2, we took a tour of our virtual teaching resource hub. In webinar 3, we reviewed some technology tips and tricks. And finally, in webinar 4, we introduced some management and engagement strategies for online instruction. Today, I'm excited because it's going to be a spotlight on the primary grades K-2, and the recording will be available tomorrow. I want to remind everyone that we are streaming this webinar to Facebook Live right now. So anyone who was not able to join our Zoom when it reached capacity, just jump over to our UFLI page on Facebook to join the live stream. And you're going to see the same exact content in real time. A few features I want to point out. If you're watching on Zoom, you're going to notice we have closed captioning, and you can enable and disable that with the CC icon at the bottom of your screen. Also in Zoom, there is a chat box, so feel free, and I've seen people already saying hello, where they're from, and sharing some resources, and you can chat throughout the entire webinar. Also in Zoom, we have, if you have any questions for the presenters, you can put them in the Q&A box, and our team is going to keep tracking them. And again, if we have time at the end of the webinar tonight, we'll be able to ask the presenters some of your questions. We also have a team standing by on our UFLI Facebook page, so if you have any questions, please just add them into the comments in Facebook, and our team will get them to us. If you have any questions that don't get answered tonight and you would like to keep the conversation going, we'd invite you to join our Facebook group, UFLI Virtual Teaching Hub Support. In that Facebook group, we love to keep conversations and people share, and we can get a lot of, we can keep the conversation going even more. We will be displaying some QR codes linked to some resources to our websites and social media throughout the webinar. So you may want to have your smartphone handy to capture and bookmark those links for later. Finally, we're offering some verification of your attendance tonight. At the end of the webinar, just like the other ones, we're going to share a link that will go to a follow-up survey, and anyone who completes the follow-up survey, whether you're watching on Zoom or on Facebook, you will receive verification attendance. At the end of our entire series is when those verifications will go out. So if you don't see it right away, it's because it won't happen until after the entire series is done. Now, that's it for the housekeeping. Now I would like to introduce you to our director, Dr. Holly Lane, to tell you a little bit more of the University of Florida Literacy Institute and introduce tonight's presenters. Welcome, Dr. Lane.
Thank you, Allie. And welcome everyone. As Allie said, my name is Holly Lane, and I'm the director of the University of Florida Literacy Institute, or UFLI. In case you're not already familiar with UFLI, we are a part of the College of Education at the University of Florida, and our mission is to support the development of readers and their teachers. So we're very excited to bring you the 5th webinar in this series, Spotlight on the Primary Grades. This is where you can learn how to use the Hub's resources to plan and implement powerful online reading instructions in kindergarten through 2nd grade. If you joined us for the other webinars, you already know about the UFLI Virtual Teaching Resource Hub. We'll be sharing the link to the Hub again a little bit later. And in this webinar, you'll get some ideas about how to use it to plan your instruction for young children. If you share on social media anything about these webinars, anything about the Virtual Teaching Hub, or about your own reading instruction online, please use the hashtag UFLI so that we'll get to see it. We are really looking forward to seeing all of the wonderful things you're going to be able to accomplish this year in your virtual teaching. So, all right, it's time to get what you came for, learning about the primary grades reading instruction. Our presenters tonight are two of our fabulous members of our team UFLI, Valentina Contess and Colleen Pollitt. Valentina and Colleen are both doctoral students at UF. Val works in our pre-service teacher preparation program, and Colleen works with practicing teachers as one of our wonderful school partnership facilitators. Both have been using the Hub resource to work with children and support teachers, and they're very excited to share some of the things that they've learned. So take it away, Val and Colleen.
Thank you, Dr. Lane. We are so excited today to bring you our 5th webinar of the series. Like Dr. Lane mentioned, you're here to learn all about how to use the Hub resources for primary grades instruction, so K through 2. The webinar will focus on tips for using the resources we have on the Hub, specifically how to use the resources most appropriate for the primary grades. Tonight we will discuss 2 main sections of the Hub, which are the lesson structure and the instructional activity sections. You've seen this visual before. We want to begin by once again mentioning that we at UFLI believe that effective instruction should always be both explicit and systematic. And as we talked a lot more during the management tips webinar, that our instruction, in order for it to be effective, should include a lot of feedback for our students and behavior-specific praise, both related to their academic performance as well as their behavior. You're also familiar with this theory that we've discussed, the simple view of reading, that shows you how reading comprehension is a product of both decoding and linguistic comprehension. So this just in a very simple formula shows you that both decoding and linguistic or language comprehension are important and critical in order for students to be able to comprehend what they read. Even though this theory is called simple, there is nothing simple about teaching children how to read. We know that. And this visual by Dr. Hollis Scarborough is great for really showing us how complex learning to read and teaching children how to read is. So as you can see, just like the simple view of reading product visual, we have language comprehension or linguistic comprehension, and then word recognition. Each of these are broken down into smaller strands. These smaller strands are critical, once again, for the development of reading comprehension. And as each of these are strengthened and become more automatic, reading comprehension is facilitated. Most of the resources on the Hub focus on the word recognition section of the rope, but this is in no way saying that language comprehension is not important. They are both equally as important. It's just we've been able to make resources to provide for you focusing on foundational reading skills, mostly related to word recognition or decoding. So here you see, again, the layout of the Hub, and we want to discuss more the instructional activities section and how it's laid out and how it will help your planning and instruction in the primary grades. This section is divided into different areas of focus, which we will discuss briefly. And also we wanted to point out that in this section, you do have access to our UFLI scope and sequence in case you need that for planning instruction. This is just one example of one of the activities within Phonemic Awareness. This is to show you that most resources have activity slides, which are typically in PowerPoint slide versions. Most do have a tutorial to help guide you use that instructional activity, and some also include some sort of sample video of a teacher with actual students, whether they're one-on-one or small group. Here's an example of the activity slides for a sorting game, which you just saw before. And this is the grid view just to see what it looks like. Just another reminder, as discussed in earlier webinars, each of the instructional activities also includes an activity explanation. This page is just for teachers, not for students. It's to help guide you and help you plan that activity for your instructional session. So now to talk more about one of the first areas of focus, phonemic awareness, or the ability to notice and manipulate individual sounds in spoken language, because that's an essential building block for later decoding skills. So as this definition shows us, phonemic awareness is all about sounds. So our activities in this section do not include letters for that reason. When we talk about phonemic awareness, we should also mention phonological awareness, which we like to think of as an umbrella term, because activities within phonological awareness can occur at different levels. They can occur at the word level, at the syllable level, at the intrasyllabic level, such as onset rhyme or body coda, or at the phoneme level. You will notice most of the activities, or all of the activities actually, on the hub are related to the phoneme level or phonemic awareness. Specifically, we target most of the activities on the hub with the skills of blending and segmenting at this phoneme level because of their utility for students decoding and encoding. Here is just brief screenshots of the 4 activities on the hub right now related to phonemic awareness. The Elkonin Boxes activity helps students practice segmenting phonemes, just as the phoneme counting activity with beads. The sorting game can actually be used for segmenting phonemes or syllables in words. And then Say It and Move It is a more complex phonemic awareness activity that allows students to manipulate sounds in a more complex way. The next main area of focus on the hub we call Phoneme-Grapheme Correspondences, because we know that children have to learn to associate the phonemes, the speech sounds, they hear with graphemes, or the letter or letter combinations that they see. So this section is organized by grapheme concepts. So you'll see it begins with the alphabet, then consonant digraphs, consonant blends, other graphemes are controlled vowels and vowel teams. We include consonant blends as a bucket on this section, but this is not to say that this should be taught as individual graphemes. We do teach our students that blends are 2 individual sounds. So children must develop a really solid understanding of what is called the alphabetic principle, or the fundamental insight that letters and sounds work together in really systematic ways to form words. This understanding is really what helps build the foundation for their ability to decode. You'll notice that the letters on the left are all lowercase and are all blue. We have designed the hub activities with letters of all one color because we want students to focus on the shape of the letter and, of course, the sound that that letter makes, instead of using color as a way to recognize which are vowels and which are consonants. So that's just an important thing to remember. And another thing to remember is that this section includes letters, but also letter combinations or more complex graphemes such as SH and OR. It's important for us to remember that we teach children the sounds that letters make so that they can blend those sounds to read words. So when we teach any phoneme-grapheme correspondence, whether they're letters or letter combinations, it's really important that we model the most blendable pronunciation of that grapheme. So this is a really helpful video of Dr. Lane producing the most blendable sounds for the letters of the alphabet. And it also provides a keyword for each of those sounds that helps you practice producing those blendable sounds. These are the 4 main activities included in these sections of the Phoneme-Grapheme Correspondence part of the hub. We have resources and slides for visual drill, which my colleague will discuss later, auditory drill, activities for alphabetical order or ABC order, and coming soon, very soon now, we are going to have introduction slides for different graphemes. Then we have the decoding and encoding section. This area of focus is really important because once students learn the phoneme-grapheme correspondences, they can begin decoding or reading or encoding or spelling words. So as soon as students know enough phonemes and graphemes, they can begin with this practice. Both decoding and encoding support each other. It's reciprocal processes. So we believe in addressing both during our instruction. So the section of the hub that's decoding and encoding has a few different tabs, which will be discussed shortly. First, we wanted to discuss what decoding is. So decoding is just another way of saying reading, which is when students translate print to speech. Then we have encoding or spelling, which is where they're translating speech to print. It doesn't always have to be with pencil paper or whiteboard marker. This could also be done with letter tiles or magnetic letters. So now to discuss decoding practice. So when we plan word work, which we'll discuss shortly, it's important to think of what kind of directions you want to provide for your students that will have them practice decoding or reading. So here's just some example prompts that you provide as a teacher to have students practice reading words. So if they're doing word work and you ask them to change a letter into another letter and ask what the new word is, that would be prompting for them to practice reading or decoding. Same if you ask them to change one sound to another sound and the student has to recognize what letter makes that sound, change it, and then read the new word. Or if you make the manipulation and add a letter and ask them what new word you spelled. Those are all examples of decoding prompts. Now for encoding practice, our prompts or our questions have to be different because this is where we want students to think about the word we've asked them to spell and they have to make the change. So here's some examples. If the student has the word sat written on their word work map, for example, and we ask them to change it to hat, they're practicing encoding. They're having to figure out what sound is different and replace the S with the H. Same with what would you have to do to change that into fast? They have to recognize what is different and that they have to slide that S in to spell or encode that new word. So when we think about word chains, we can make word chains at different levels. So the first level is the onset rhyme level. Here you see an example where the teacher has planned a word chain focused on the at word family or phonogram. The only thing that changed is the initial sound. So this would be appropriate for students who are just beginning to learn how to decode, to provide a lot of repeated practice with the at word family. Here's an example of a phoneme level word chain that is targeted. So this group of students is practicing the short I sound. So all of the words follow that pattern. They include that targeted concept of short I. One thing to point out before I share the next word chain is that with word chains, it's really important that you only make one change at a time. So of course, with onset rhyme, you see that we've only changed the initial sound. Here for the targeted practice, even though short I stayed the same, I only changed one of the letters at a time. So here was the initial, 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 and then the end. So only one change at a time so your students can be able to do the word work. And then the last is phoneme level but mixed. Instead of targeting a sound, this would be an example of the students had learned short I and they already knew also short O and short A. So even though it begins with short eye practice, it quickly moves on to practice other things. You can see that in both of these examples, I've included words with blends and with the S at the end. Okay, we have a resource here. If you want to find out more about how children learn to read words, you can find this handout on the hub, which describes ERIE's phases of word recognition development. So if you want to read more about your students' progress and development, this is a handy tool. Okay, so now to talk more about word work, which I keep mentioning. We at UFLI use the term word work to represent all activities that promote effective and efficient word reading, especially where we are developing proficiency with blending letter sounds and the manipulation of sounds to read or spell words. The activities in this section are designed to provide students with practice that will make them stronger word readers or more efficient word readers, which is necessary in order to be able to comprehend. So this is the list of activities that we have currently available on the hub. And we also have some sample videos related to these decoding and encoding activities. This, again, is a snapshot of all the activities we have related to decoding and encoding. So you see manipulative letters, regular word spelling, blending drill, both with the app and the PowerPoint or slide version, and then our 2 word work mats here on the right. So to talk a little bit more about the word work apps. So we have the one on the top, which we call the beginner app, which only includes the alphabet letters. You'll notice here that we've made all the tiles for the alphabet blue, again, so that students focus on the letter and the sound rather than recognizing that some are vowels because they're red, or another example based on other types of color combinations that manufacturers use. Here's an example that you see the student or the teacher was changing sat to mat by dragging the M over to cover up the S. The little spinny arrow on the right is to clear the app. And also many teachers have been using the little question mark on the left corner as kind of like a trash or bin if you're just wanting to move tiles to the side. Now, you'll notice that our intermediate word work mat includes other graphemes, so consonant digraphs, our control vowels, and vowel teams. The reason for the colors of these different types of categories is not so that students learn the categories by color. It's just to help students be able to categorize them better, to grab tiles to make words and then return them. One thing I forgot to mention is that the alphabet tiles, both in the beginner and the intermediate apps, have multiple tiles for one letter, whereas the more complex graphemes only have one. So you see here the OR is missing because it's up here. Okay, I keep wanting to ask, does anyone have questions? I'm used to face-to-face teaching. Here, one thing I forgot to mention, so sorry, is that the word work mats are intended for students to practice both decoding and encoding. And that's why if you are manipulating, the students can kind of boss you around and help you spell, or if they have control, they can do the spelling or encoding. Whereas the blending drill is really for proficient decoding. So the teacher is the one making the changes and making the words, and the student is just focused on reading. Okay, one thing we wanted to point out is that the letters on the blending drill do not mean anything. Again, it's just for the teacher to be able to easily see the initial, middle, final placement, and then the pink are any extra graphemes needed to make silent E words or words that are plural. Again, the focus of this activity is decoding. And that's what the student is focused on seeing. We are really excited to share a new thing we discovered over the weekend, actually, where we use the manipulative letter slides in Google Slides. So you can see here a screenshot where the teacher has a slide per student in her group. Okay, and the students would click their link to go to their word map. She is viewing it in grid mode, but the students would just be manipulating with their whole slide on their computer or laptop. As the teacher asks the students to make the changes, the teacher, as you can see here, can see these 3 students who are participating make the words. So this is an amazing way to be able to have all of your students both encode and decode at the same time and for you to monitor. We are really excited about this, and we will be posting a full tutorial very soon. Okay, so the last few things we wanted to show you in this section are the word cards that we have available. But actually, before I move on, I wanted to mention that we do have a big word section here in the Navy. This includes resources that are for multisyllabic words and morpheme instruction. They will discuss this in a lot more detail at the spotlight for the intermediate grades coming up. So now to show you the word cards resources. They are just organized here as lists, and to show you an example here with the short vowel word cards, when you click that, a PowerPoint downloads, and this is again the grid view for you to see. The blue square includes the target concept in the corner in the top left, and then all the word cards that match that target concept, for example, short E, are included there. The word lists are also very helpful for planning instruction. They're also listed just by concept, and to show you the example for short vowels, this is just a little snapshot of the PowerPoint that you download. The first slides, well, all the slides include the target concept at the top this time. The first slide for each target concept is just the words on the slide. The second version includes animation, so you would use this in presenter mode, and as you click, the words would appear. And then the last resource has the word list with the visual isolation that we've mentioned in previous webinars, that just the shape to be able to drag down the shape and reveal the words. So these are the 2 other resources for decoding and encoding that we have available. Okay, so we are very excited. We just added a new wonderful resource here, which is called Finder. Our wonderful colleague, Dr. Devin Kearns from the University of Connecticut, developed this free resource. So if you wanted additional words to use for word work or decoding and encoding practice, in addition to what we have with the word cards and the word list, you can go here. Once you click the link on the hub, it will take you to this site, and you click here in the corner where it says go to Finder. It will pop up a large window that looks like this, and you see that it's numbered. So the first step is to choose the grapheme that you're teaching. For example, if you were teaching AR, I would click that. Then the next step is to choose the phoneme. So for the grapheme AR, I want to teach just the R sound. Here in part 3, it just shows me what I selected to double check, and then I click search words. What this amazing resource does is it lists out here in number 4 all of the words that include that grapheme and phoneme, so the R sound for AR, in frequency order. So you can see part is the most frequent word in text with the AR sound. As you can see, these are not listed as word chains, so you would still have to, if you were using this resource for that reason, you would still have to order them correctly. But this is a great way to make sure we include frequently used words in our decoding and encoding practice. You can also go to options and select the word, how many syllables or letters you want your list to generate. So yeah, very excited to share that. And now to briefly talk about the irregular words and high frequency words section. So we do have these two buckets here for this section because we know that many schools and districts are teaching high frequency words using Fry and Dolch word lists. So we've included those word cards, but we wanted to share a little bit more about our irregular word resources. So we have what we are calling irregular heart word slides and then word cards that we've made red. So many common words that have any kind of irregularities pose some challenges for students as you're reading text because they contain parts in them that don't make their most common sounds. Some words are always irregular, so permanently irregular, such as the word said, right? Students are never going to learn that AI says that sound. And some are just temporarily irregular. That means that the students haven't learned the grapheme phoneme correspondences needed to read that word yet. So these are those two resources in the irregular words section. And when you download the Irregular Heart Words PowerPoint, it has 4 slides with explanations of the visual aids, the boxes and the hearts, and then how to use the visual isolation. So I wanted to show you an example with the word said. Here at the bottom are notes again for the teacher to point out what part is irregular. Again, some of it is that it's permanently irregular, like this and said, and sometimes it's temporarily irregular, that the students just haven't learned that concept yet. We use this resource of heart words to really promote orthographic mapping of these words by helping students identify the regular phoneme-grapheme correspondences in the word and then the parts that are irregular, that don't follow the typical phoneme-grapheme correspondences that they learned, so that they learn that part as the part they have to learn by heart. So that's how we discuss that irregular part. So here's an example where you would first show the students the word with the box covering the codes and then help guide the students to identify what parts are regular with the sound boxes and then what part doesn't make the sound that they're used to, the word that they have to learn by heart. And then we use the box again to cover up those visual aids to then ask the students again after the initial teaching of the word what the word is. The next focus area is connected text. Of course, it's very important that students are practicing reading books or passages that include the words that they've been practicing reading in isolation. So we do not have our own text at this time. So what we provided is a list of resources that include both digital books or passages that students can practice reading of connected text. Then in the last area of focus in writing, we have sentence writing resources and then writing paper for either sentence writing or regular word writing. You'll notice in this section that there's paper intended for the primary grades and also the intermediate grades, which you'll learn more about in the next webinar. We also have resources for letter formation. And for these resources, the easiest way to use in the digital platform is through the annotate feature, where you write on top of the dotted lines for students to see. And again, these are the 2 resources there. Okay, so back to our 6 areas of focus that we've gone through now in detail. And just, once again, to discuss that really all of these resources are intended to take evidence-based practices for teaching reading in the classroom to now digital teaching on the computer. Okay, so now I get to introduce you to this great visual that helps us really see how assessment, planning, and instruction are connected and how we should think of this as a cycle, an ongoing cycle. So to discuss a little bit about assessment, we want to make sure that we always use assessment to drive our planning and instruction. So as we've mentioned before, you can use any assessment that you typically do face-to-face digitally by projecting on slides, and then you write your notes on the paper version of the assessment. For the primary grades, we're suggesting that you focus on assessing the skills of phonemic awareness and decoding at least. Of course, many schools and districts have their own assessments, so we're not going to provide specific names of assessments at this time, but use whatever is available to you. Here's a quick video of an assessment for an incoming kindergartner. So this is a screening assessment.
Jump.
Good job, Sarah.
Let pun, hug.
Good job. Try these. Okay, so that was just a quick snippet for you to see how she was doing a letter sound part of an assessment, and then a decoding assessment. And of course, I was writing notes on my paper. The next part is planning instruction, using that assessment to plan. You've seen these visuals before. It's important to think about grouping when planning instruction, as well as different instructional formats, whether it's going to be synchronous instruction or asynchronous instruction. It's important in order to be able to provide systematic instruction to use a scope and sequence. The one on the back with the red letters is one provided by a curriculum. If you don't have a scope and sequence, we do have the UFLI scope and sequence you can use to plan. And of course, the most important part for planning is finding out how much time you have with students. So just a quick overview of how our scope and sequence is set up. The most simple concepts are listed starting with group 1 at the top, and as you go down, they become more complex. You notice, have our concepts grouped. So we think of groups 1 through 5 as kindergarten concepts, 6 through 12 as first grade concepts, and then the rest as second grade concepts. Of course, this may look different than what you use at your school or your district, and that is fine. Again, this is just suggestions, and you should stick with whatever scope and groupings you all use at your schools. And of course, it's important to mention that we have grouped our concepts because we are less worried about the exact order, more so that the students master concepts in group 1 before moving on to group 2, and so on. And of course, if by second grade, based on assessment, you notice that students have not mastered any of the groups before group 13, it would be important to provide instruction addressing those concepts. You've seen this visual before. This is just to remind you that our assessment, our scope and sequence, and our time that we have with students dictates what we plan. Sometimes we may have even days and odd days, I like to think of them, when we don't have enough time to cover all of the areas of focus we need to cover in one day. And sometimes we may have activities that students really need to do every day, so we include them every time we meet with students. Okay, so now that I've talked for a very long time, I get to pass it on to my wonderful colleague, Colleen, who is going to discuss more about planning and differentiating instruction.
Thank you, Val. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Yes, I am going to take you through, now that Valentina gave you a really great overview of what we have to offer on the Hub, I'm going to show you how to take all of these wonderful resources and put them together into a lesson that you can use with your students. So for this portion of the presentation, we'll be pulling resources that are from the lesson structure and the instructional activities portion of the Hub. And then, Val, can we up the slide. Thank you. Perfect. So we're going to go, yep, lesson structure and instructional activities. If you click on lesson structure, we have, as of probably about a couple hours ago, we're really excited. We have a lesson planning table and some example tables for you to use and edit to make your own lesson plan. So we're going to look at those in a little bit more detail. The first one we'll look at is the blank lesson planning table. So this is an editable table. If you download it from the hub, it's a Word document, so you can type into it or print it out, whatever you want to do. Just remember, this table is just one option for how to plan lessons. Your planning should always be guided by your individual students' needs and your school and district and state requirements. So all of these examples are just that, examples. So in the first column of this table, you'll see the area of focus, and these are the categories of activities that Valentina walked us through earlier. We want to include activities from each of these areas throughout our lessons, but attempting to fit all of these areas into one lesson is probably pretty unrealistic, especially in a digital format. So that's why we've created this planning table as a 5-day sequence. So you can take all of these areas of focus and try to kind of spread them out over the course of 5 days. And now we, at the bottom here, you'll see an instructional activity menu. So these are, again, those areas of focus, and they are hyperlinked to the specific page on the hub. And the bulleted lists below each area are the individual activities that you can pull for each area. So on the next slide, we'll see an examples shell. So this is just an example of how 1 week's worth of small group lessons might be planned. So in this example, we planned for 20-minute lessons. You're always going to want to start with that amount of time that you know that you have, and then backwards plan from there. So if you have 30 minutes, plan for 30. If you have 15, plan for 15. And then you'll be able to more strategically figure out what you can realistically do in that amount of time. So in this example, we have 3 days dedicated to foundational skills instruction, and then 2 days, so that's day 1, 3, and 5, and then we have 2 days dedicated to reading and writing connected text. And so to build this example, I just took the bulleted list from that activity menu and copy and pasted those activities into the appropriate cells. And then on the next page, you'll see that I then took those activities and actually created my own lesson plan. So this slide and the slide before, these are on the hub as downloadable PDFs that you can use to reference. So I'm going to spend a minute here going into detail about this lesson structure and what it looks like, and why it looks the way it does. So I'm going to go through each area of focus. So starting with the phonemic awareness, we have 3 days of phonemic awareness. On day 1, we play the sorting game, and we're going to sort words with 2 and 3 and 4 phonemes. On day 3, we're going to use Elkonin Boxes to break apart words with 3 phonemes in them. And then on day 5, we're going to count words that have 2, 3, or 4 phonemes. And then moving on to Phoneme-Grapheme Correspondences. On day 1, I'm going to introduce a new concept, the short E sound, and I'm referring to my UFLI scope and sequence to pace my lessons here. And then on day 3 and day 5, I'm going to use visual and auditory drills to practice phonemes and graphemes that I've already taught previously. Then moving on to decoding and encoding. On day 1, I'm going to do a word sort where I sort words that have a short E sound versus a short A sound. On day 3, I'm going to use my word work mat to have my students build and decode and encode CVC words. And then on day 5, I'm going to use my blending drill to build that automaticity with decoding. Then moving on to irregular and high frequency words. On day 1 and day 5, I'm just going to practice irregular words that I already have taught. And then on day 3, I'm going to do that practice, but I'm also going to introduce a new word so that I can add that to my repertoire of words that we can practice. And then finally, the connected text. We've got connected text and writing on day 2 and day 4. So that whole entire session on day 2 and day 4 is just going to be devoted to reading books and writing. So on day 2, you can see that the sentence writing is a dictated sentence, and I've planned out what that sentence is. And then on day 4, the writing is going to be generated together with the group. So again, this is just one example of what a structure might look like. What I would recommend is downloading that first editable template and playing around with it based on the amount of time you have and your students' needs. And then once you have kind of a shell, then you can take that kind of as your lesson planning template and build out your individual lessons like you see here. So we've highlighted day 3 because this is the day we're going to use to build out a lesson, just as an example for you all tonight. So now let's look at how to actually make a lesson now that we've planned out our instruction. So to get started, we're going to go to the lesson structure section of the hub, and then we're going to click on our individual grade level. I'm going to use first grade just as an example. Once I click on first grade, this is the page that comes up. So I can see the first 2 options there are my lesson planning template, and we're very excited that we now have the lesson template in Google Slides. And I've been seeing a lot of the comments. We're very excited about the Google Slides, which is awesome. And we are working on building out more and more of our resources in Google Slide format. They're not all done yet, but we are working on that. So in any case, if you download the Google slide, it will save to your Google Drive. If you download the PowerPoint, it will save to your computer as a PowerPoint file. One important thing to note, on the next slide, you'll see a looped video that just gives you just a kind of heads up as you're planning. So if you're using PowerPoint slides, you're gonna wanna duplicate the template that you've downloaded and save it as a different file name. I just saved it here as a file called My Lesson. The reason that I did that is because now I have that template saved to my computer. So instead of having to go back to the hub every time I want to make a lesson and re-download that template, I have it on my computer ready to go. And then I have that copy as the lesson that I'm actually going to build and manipulate. And I will say, once the first time we build these lessons, it's probably the most time consuming and the most cumbersome, but once we've built them, it becomes easier and easier to then just tweak and rebuild more slides. So once I've downloaded that template, this is what that slide deck looks like. And so to get started, I am going to focus on the first 4 slides looking at that schedule, and then at slide 3 and 4 to look at the headings that I'm going to use to build my visual schedule. So a visual schedule might not be something that is in your instructional practice right now, but I would recommend using it as an instructional routine, even if you're not sure that your kids will need it. It helps me as the teacher to stay focused. It helps the kids to stay focused and just stay on track and know exactly where we are in the lesson and how much more we have to go and what we've accomplished. So to build that visual schedule for your students, you're just going to take these 2 slides and highlight the activities that are going to be included in your lesson. So remember, we're using that day 3 from the template. So these are the activities that I'm going to use, and I'm going to highlight that check mark as well, copy and paste it into that first slide. So now I have my beautiful visual schedule ready to go. And then we have here, so now you can see it's the same template, everything is the same, we just have that schedule built out. So now that I have my schedule built out, I know what activities I'm gonna do. I can delete everything else that I don't need. And because remember, I already saved this as a copy, so my template is still intact on my computer. This is my lesson that I'm building. So I'm deleting all these slides that I don't need, and then I have a clean sheet with just the slides of the activities that I'm going to be using. So these slides that you see right here are just title slides. So your next step is going to be going back into the hub for each of these activities and downloading those templates and then copying and pasting the slides from that activity template into your master lesson slide. And so we're going to look at what that looks like here. So this is just a quick screen recording video. And so you'll see I have my lesson plan opened on the left side, or sorry, on the right side. And then I have the Elkonin Boxes activity template opened on the left. And so I'm selecting the slides that I want from that Elkonin box template, and I'm copying, I'm hitting Command or Control C, and then pasting into the My Lesson template. So now in my lesson template, I have my header slide and I have all of my actual activity slides that I need. I'm gonna repeat that same process for all of the activities that require slides from the hub. So in this case, that would be the visual drill. So I have my visual drill slides and my irregular words. I'm using the heart words, so I pulled my heart word slides. You'll notice that the auditory drill and the word work mat don't have extra slides. Those don't require PowerPoint slides, and we'll show you why and what that looks like in just a minute. So now I've got my schedule, I've built my lesson plan. Let's look at what this lesson might actually look like. So starting with Elkonin Boxes, you'll see that the slides, they are all structured the same. The example I have is a fish. So you'll see the picture of the fish and you'll see tokens at the bottom. So remember, this is a phonemic awareness activity. So it is purely auditory. We are not using any letters or graphemes at all in this activity. It's just listening. So that's why you see the picture of the fish instead of the word fish, and that's why you see the colored tokens instead of letters. So the idea here is that we've got the box, this white box covering the Elkonin box grid. And once you reveal that grid, you can see that you have one box for each sound in the word. And what you would do is you would, with your students, drag the tokens into each box as you say the sounds in the word. So this is another looped video that shows you what that would look like. So you would go, sh, fish. And then again, sh, fish. So you can see here, I am in editing mode in the PowerPoint. So this does not work if you're in presentation view because you are going to have to physically click and drag those circles, those tokens to go into the boxes. So the way that I've done it here is I've just hidden my notes and I've hidden my preview slides, and I've just zoomed in on my slide just so it's as big and as clean as possible. If your students have the capability of gaining remote access to the mouse, they can actually be the ones to click and drag the tokens. If not, you would be the one clicking and dragging, and you would just wait for their guidance to tell you what to do. So those are the Elkonin box activities. Next, we have our visual drill. So really quick, the visual drill is a way to build automaticity with phoneme-grapheme correspondences. So this is used for reviewing graphemes that have already been taught. And so you'll present the student with a grapheme and they will say the name of that grapheme and the sound that it makes. So for example, I would show this to my students and they would say, P says P, and so on. F says F. O says ah, D says d. So again, this is just for quick review of graphemes that have already been taught. This looped video right here shows you how easy it is to edit these tiles. They are all text boxes. So if you have a set of graphemes and you want to change them out, if you can't find the graphemes on the hub or there's too many slides, you can just edit them on the spot in your presentation. Next, we'll look at a quick video showing you what this looks like in practice.
This one, we get to practice our letters. We're going to call this our visual drill. So when you see the letter on the screen, you're going to tell me the letter that you see and then the sound. So make sure you're looking and listening so you see my example. I'm going to look at this and say, A says ah. But all together, so you have to wait for me to say go or 1, 2, 3. Ready? Let's try with this one. What's this letter? 1, 2, 3.
A.
Good. So you're going to say M says let's try it again. Wait for me to say 3. 1, 2, 3. Says Good job.
T says
Good. T says t. Let's try that one again. Ready? T says t. Good job. We'll keep practicing.
Awesome. So we finished our visual drill and then we move on to our auditory drill. And I know we are just about at time, but we're going to go a little bit over this evening just because we have so many good resources to share with you. And remember, this will be recorded. So if you can't hang on with us tonight, you'll be able to catch the recording when it is posted. But moving right along, we have our auditory drill. So the auditory drill is connected to the visual drill in that it is meant to be a quick review to build automaticity. The difference here is that the students are being presented with a sound, and then they are meant to produce by writing the grapheme that connects with that phoneme or that sound. So you would not use any presentation tools for this. You would actually stop sharing your screen and you would get really close to the camera so your students can see your mouth so they can take notice of the articulatory gesture that you are making. And here is a quick video of what that looks like.
See the sound? Olive Sue looking. We're going to repeat the sound and write the letters. So let's pretend I'm the teacher first. My teacher is going to say, and now I'm the student. I'm going to say, is, and then I'm going to wait for my teacher to say, 3, 2, 1, show me. Did I get it right, friends? Thumbs up if I got it right. Very good. Are you ready for your sounds? All right, I'm going to erase 3, 2, 1. All right, looking and listening so you know what to write. What letter says ah? Show me on your board. Good job writing. Say the sound if you need to. Ah. Show me in 3, 2, 1. Show me. Good job, friends. A says ah. Put it in front of you. Try to do lowercase letters because those are the ones we have to practice the most. Thank you for showing me that, Ava. Okay. Very good. Go ahead and erase. 3, 2, 1. Thumbs up that you're ready for the next one. Say the sound.
So that's what our auditory drill looks like. And I'm seeing some questions in the chat about the check mark. So just to clarify, because I didn't mention that, when you're in editing mode, the check mark is an image icon. So you can, in real time, copy and paste that image and drag it over to the boxes, or in advance, you can just build those slides out with the check marks already in there and just pop them into the places that they need to be. So moving on to our word work mat as our next activity in this sample lesson. Just like the auditory drill, you're not going to need anything in the presentation for the word work mat. You're actually going to jump out into your browser and use the digital app. So this is another looped video that shows you how that works. So this is the word work mat as it exists in the app. And you would just click and drag the grapheme tiles into the boxes that they need to go in so that your students can practice encoding and decoding those words. So again, if your students have remote control access to be able to manipulate the screen, you can let them click and drag for you. If they don't have that, you would just listen for their directions and do what they said. So that's really important, to listen and do what they're telling you to do, because then that keeps it more interactive, and it doesn't devolve into just a modeling lesson. You want them to be engaged, and you want them to be kind of driving, building, and changing these words.
Thumbs up that you see.
So we do have more video examples, more than just these little snippets, on our lesson structure tab. So if you want more videos and more examples, go there and you'll be able to see an entire lesson. And as we build our resources, we are building more example videos as well. So finally, we have our irregular words as the last activity in this sample lesson. And we are using the heart words for this activity. So Val did a beautiful job explaining this earlier. So remember, as you download the heart word PowerPoint slides, the explanation for why the words are irregular are in the PowerPoint notes. So if you read those PowerPoint notes, you'll be able to see exactly why they're irregular. And again, the way these work is the square tiles represent the decodable graphemes, and then the heart and the underline represents the irregular piece of the word that your students are going to have to learn by heart. And you can, for initial instruction, reveal the visual aid and work through that with your students. But then for review, you're going to want to cover that up so they can just practice building their automaticity with reading and spelling those words, and then just reveal that visual aid if they need that guidance. But you don't want them depending on that after they've had time for practice. And then that brings us to the end of our demo lesson. So the only thing I don't have in here is a reinforcer. So at the end of your lessons that you build with your students, I highly recommend building in some sort of a fun activity. Go Noodle is very popular, something that they can all engage in, so that we can celebrate being done with an awesome reading lesson. So again, moving back to this visual that's kind of anchoring our learning today, we want to remember that as we build these lessons, we don't stop there. This isn't a linear process, it's cyclical. So after we deliver this really great differentiated instruction, we always want to go back and continue that assessment. So just a few considerations that we can make for progress monitoring. We could do an entire webinar on assessment and progress monitoring, but just a few reflection questions to leave you with today. So think about which skills you want to monitor. And which students need to be monitored for progress. Are there skills that you need to monitor the entire group, or are there skills that you just need to check in with a couple of students? And then thinking about time, how frequently do you want to monitor progress? And does that frequency change depending on the student? Are there some students you just need to check in with quarterly, and are there other students who you need to check in with on a more regular basis? And then organization, how am I going to collect and manage all of this data? But most importantly, the question that should drive all of this is, how will I use this progress monitoring data I've collected to inform my instruction moving forward? So again, just kind of keeping that cycle in mind, and it is a cycle to, after we assess, we plan, and our planning leads to instruction, which leads to assessment, and so on. So thank you all for bearing with us, and I hope, I'm seeing the chat, I'm loving how excited everybody is. This is wonderful. To close out this evening, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Lane to share a few more resources and what's next with UFLI.
Thanks, Colleen and Val. That was amazing. And judging from the chat and the Q&A, everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. We're very glad that you all are here for this webinar, and we just want to let you know that we will have one more in this series. The Spotlight on the Intermediate Grades will be this Thursday, and we're very excited about that one as well. In the meantime, if you missed any of the previous webinars, you can access them on the UFLI website. You can also access our other resource hubs. There's one about dyslexia and a parent resource hub for supporting literacy development at home. This is the link to the UFLI website. And if you haven't yet, please do visit the Virtual Teaching Resource Hub. This is the link for that. We would love it if you came and followed us on Facebook as well. There's also the Facebook group for supporting teachers as they're using the Virtual Teaching Resource Hub. And of course, follow us on Twitter as well. In closing, I do want to join and thank you for joining us and remind you that all of the resources on the Virtual Teaching Resource Hub are free. We would really like to keep it that way. So we ask you to please consider supporting our efforts with a donation to UFLI. Every little bit helps. And the very last thing, this is the survey. We would love it if you all filled it out, but if you would like to have verification of your attendance in this webinar, we need you to complete this so that we will be able to send you that verification. Verification emails will go out sometime next week. Thank you again for coming, and good night.